And I,
All right, I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. We have David Dodge. He's going to give us some information about the BRRRR Real Estate Investing Method. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with that, but let's just jump right into it. Everything presented today is for educational purposes. Camaplan does not give any tax, legal, or investment advice. Please consult with your CPAs, attorneys, and other professionals. This is my contact information for anybody that has questions about using your retirement account, IRAs, 401ks, etc. rfisher@camaplan.com, and our toll-free number there, 866-559-4430. This is a little bit about David. I'll let him go into that with you, but I will go ahead. Are you going to be talking, David, or you want me to turn the screen over to you?
oh yeah, hey, whatever makes the most sense. You'll need to enable my camera. When I click the camera button, it says that the host needs to enable it.
Let's do that first. Hold on here. I don't know why it's not allowing me to do that, but I'm just going to say make co-host.
Yeah, there you go. That should help. Yeah, now the co-host. Okay, there it goes. All right. Can you guys see me and hear me? All right.
Yeah. Yep. I'm gonna say stop share so you can take over. All right.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, you're good to go.
All right, guys. Well, again, yeah, thank you so much for having me, Ryan. Sorry I'm a few minutes late, but I am here and I am ready to rock and roll. So today, let me clean up some of my softwares on my computer just really quick so I don't get interrupted. Cool, that looks good. Today, do you all want me to touch on the BRRRR method? Do you all want me to touch on wholesaling? Do you want me to touch on real estate investing just as a whole? I'm an open book and I can do anything and everything that the audience, wants me to touch on. I've been investing in real estate for about 18 years, 19 years, give or take. I've been full-time in this business for about 8 years. And I specialize in the BRRRR method. That's my passion. That's my favorite thing to do. However, we do a ton of wholesale deals and creative financing deals, and we're starting to do smaller to medium-sized apartment buildings and conversions. Done about 1,000 transactions in the last 8 years. So, when it comes to real estate, all things real estate, I'm happy to discuss. Ryan, do you have any particular topics you'd like me to dive into?
I'd say you could probably touch on a couple of those there, but yeah, go ahead and start with you do a lot of the BRRRR stuff and then wholesaling. I'd say go ahead and touch base on that, and anybody who has any questions, we're welcome to take them throughout it. You can put them in the Q&A or the chat box. Obviously you can ask at the end as well. So yeah, just tell us how you kind of got into this and why you like it.
Okay, yeah, definitely. That's easy enough for me. So I got into real estate investing when I was 21 years old. I am 38 at this point. So I've been in the game for about 18 years, give or take. And I started when I was in college, and I used a strategy called house hacking. And what that means for those that are unaware is that you buy a home or a small multifamily unit. You live in one of the units or bedrooms, and then you rent out the rest of the available rooms or units. Now, I didn't start with multifamily. Some people will start with a duplex or a threeplex or a fourplex even. I started with a single family home. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bath home. So I bought that home. I used a loan to buy it. I used another loan from friends and family for my 20% down. So I had no money out of pocket, borrowed, 80% of the purchase from a bank, and I borrowed the other 20% that I needed to put down for my family and my friends. Once I had the home and acquired the home and was the owner of the home, I rented out the other 3 bedrooms that I wasn't living in. I was living in one of those bedrooms, and I rented out the other 3 to friends while we were in college. And that essentially allowed me to live for free while I was living in that unit. So, I still had various jobs and small businesses. So I just would pay back over the course of 1 or 2 years, the 20% that I borrowed from friends and family to put down to be able to get the loan, to be able to buy the home. And, over the next 8-9 years, I did this basically once a year. So I would go find a new home. I would buy it as a primary residence because I would live in it for at least a year. And I would basically house hack my way to owning rental properties. In fact, I did that maybe 3 or 4 times with the house hacking play. And then from there, I would just buy them as rental properties. So I'd go to the bank and I would just say, hey, I don't plan on living in these after the first 3 or 4 I did. And I'd have to pay a little bit higher interest rate to get them because I wasn't a primary resident in those. But I was still able to acquire those rental properties. So basically over the first 10 years, I think I got to 12 properties. So 2 of those 10 years, I got lucky and I was able to buy 2 properties in a year instead of 1. But for the most part, it took me 10 years to get to 12 properties. And I was doing it the wrong way. And I say that because now I know a better way, not necessarily a wrong way, but compared to the way I do it now, it was a very slow, inefficient way. So why was it wrong? Well, it was wrong because I was putting down 20%. And if I didn't have the money, I was borrowing it from friends and family and acquaintances. And then I was getting a bank loan for the other 80%. Now I can acquire rental properties without putting down 20%. And there's a strategy that we use that, we'll get to here in a minute that will help us do so. So the first thing I did wrong was I was putting down 20%. And the reason I was putting down 20% is because I was paying full retail for these properties. And that's another thing that I like to refer to as, the wrong way to do it, right? Now I'm buying all my properties at discounts. But in the beginning, I was going and I was finding a real estate agent. And then we would then go to the MLS, the multiple listing service where all the listed properties are at. We'd find a property that we'd want to buy or I'd want to buy. He would help me coordinate, all of the stuff that was needed in order to buy that property. We would negotiate that property, but we weren't really able to get much of a discount. If anything, we could get a couple $1,000s off. But at the end of the day, when you're buying a property on market retail via an agent, you're typically going to be paying full retail for that property. And if you aren't paying full retail, let's say you get it at a 90 or 95 cents on the dollar, so 5 to 10% discount. Well, the bank's going to send an appraiser out, and the appraiser's job is to determine the current market value of the property. Well, it's really, really easy for an appraiser to do their job if you have a property under contract and you're willing to buy it from someone else at a certain price. You've essentially done the job of the appraiser for them. So for example, if I find a property on the market and that property's, listed for 170,000 and I'm able to negotiate them down to, let's say 165,000, not a very big discount, I know, but I'm willing to pay 165,000. Well, the job of the appraiser is to determine what the public, what me as the buyer, what a buyer will be willing to pay for the property. And if I'm willing to pay 165,000 for it, pretty safe and fair to say that someone else would be willing to pay that for it. So I've done the job of the appraiser already. So he's going to go to the bank and he's going to say, hey, Dave's willing to buy this for 165. I'm pretty confident that someone else in the marketplace would be willing to pay that too. Therefore, the value of the property is 165,000. So why is this, why, am I referring to this as, me doing this the wrong way? Well, I was doing it the wrong way because I was paying full retail for properties. Nowadays, I buy properties at steep discounts, deep discounts, typically 20 to 25% minimum. Ideally, I want to see a 30% discount on a property that I buy. So let's fast forward. About 8 years ago, I went full-time in the business. I had 12 rental properties at the time. I started wholesaling properties. That was the easiest way for me to get into the business as a full-time investor without being an agent. I never had any desire to be licensed to be an agent or a broker. I still don't. I want nothing to do with that business. I want to be the owner. I want to be the landlord. I want to be the guy fixing and flipping. I don't want to be showing, prospective buyers properties to make a commission. I'm not saying that that's a bad approach. I just don't want to be doing all the legwork for somebody else to make money. I want to be the one owning the property and getting all the advantages of owning real estate. So I wholesaled properties for a couple years exclusively. That's basically all I was doing. And I did that for probably about, let's say 3.5 to 4 years. And then about 4 years ago, halfway through my stint of being a full-time investor, I realized that I was just spinning my tires wholesaling properties. Yeah, I was making some money. Yeah, I was having fun. Yeah, I built a team. Yeah, I definitely had some successes with that. But when you're doing a wholesale deal, you are marketing to find a motivated seller, somebody that has got a distressed situation in their life or a distressed property that they own, sometimes both. And you're trying to get that property at a really great price. And then when you get that property under contract at a great price, you turn around and you sell the paperwork, the contract to purchase the home for a good price. You're not actually buying and selling real estate when you're wholesaling. You're using paperwork, contracts to gain control of real estate, and then you're selling the contract to purchase. That's what a wholesale is. So, I built a really great skill over the first 3.5 to 4 years of marketing to motivated sellers and running appointments and negotiating and finding distressed property owners and building confidence to walk into the property and say, yeah, I'll pay you cash for this. And we can close in 3 weeks or less. And then taking that contract to a marketplace or a buyer's list that I had built, and I'm still working on building it always, every day. And I'll take that contract to purchase that deal to them. I get it at a great price, and I turn around and I sell it to them at a good price, and I make a spread. And that's called a margin. And that margin can be anywhere from $500 all the way up to $300,000. My biggest deal to date was $320,000 on a wholesale deal. So wholesaling is a great place to start. It's a great way to get involved in real estate. But not all deals are going to be $320,000. Typically speaking, our average deal here in the Midwest, where I live in St. Louis, Missouri, is going to be somewhere between 8 and 12,000. But you got to think you're spending a couple thousand typically to get the deal in marketing costs and time. So at the end of the day, you maybe make 6, 7, 8,000 when you do a wholesale deal. And again, that's good money. I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm above that. But you start over every time that you do a deal. You find a seller, you get it under contract, you market that contract for sale, you find a buyer, you link up those dots, you make sure that transaction is smooth, you get paid, and then you got to start all over again. Well, I had already started it with the rental business, Ryan, and I thought that it would make more sense to go back to that plan. And that's what I did. So about 3.5, 4 years ago, I decided, hey, I'm going to use these new skills that I've learned over the last couple of years to market and find deals and find distressed properties and property owners, and get these properties under contract at discounts. But instead of then taking it to a buyer and trying to sell that contract, I'm going to close on the deal, and I'm going to rehab the deal, and I'm going to keep the deal as a rental property, because that's what my buyers were typically doing. My buyers, when I'm wholesaling, they're typically buying it to rehab it and fix and flip, or to rehab it and keep it as a rental. That makes up about 95% of what the buyers that I'd sell my wholesale deals to would do. So I got wise.
Transitioned into buy and hold then?
Essentially, yes. And we still do some fix and flip. We still do some wholesale, but really we've kind of changed the model, or the motto, I think is a better word, within our office. It's keep the best and wholesale the rest. It rhymes, it's catchy, it's short and sweet. Love that saying, keep the best, wholesale the rest. And that's what we do. So,
Nice.
if it makes for a good rental hold, we're going to keep it. If it makes for a good rehab, one that's, not too crazy in terms of scope, maybe close to home or close to the office, then we're going to keep that as a fix and flip. But if it's too far away, too small, too big, too much work, not enough profit, then we're going to wholesale that deal. So we have a couple different exits at this point, but my favorite strategy is keeping it. It's owning the real estate. It's being a landlord. And at this point in time, I own about 13, maybe even $14 million worth of real estate. Doesn't mean that that real estate's paid off, but that's the total value of all of the real estate that, me and my business own at this point. And my goal is to take that up to about 100 million. I'd love to be $100 million, or have $100 million worth of debt, which would essentially mean I'd have roughly 70 to 80 million dollars, $100 million worth of assets under management. But, if I have, like, let's say a 70 or 75% loan to value, that means that I'm going to owe the banks about $75 million. Well, here's the good thing though. With real estate, you can create good debt. So most people when they refer to debt, they think of credit card debt. They think of mortgage debt on their primary residence. They think of car loans, maybe even consumer debt. Like, maybe you have a Target credit card or a Lowe's credit card, or, a Nordstrom credit card, right? Well, those are all examples of bad debt. And the definition of bad debt is debt that you create that you have to pay back. Well, there's another type of debt for all those watching, and it's called good debt. And good debt is debt that you create, but somebody else pays it off for you. And that's what happens with rental properties. So in the beginning, I did it wrong because I was putting down 20%, even though it may not have been my money. I may have borrowed that money. I'd have to pay that money back over, 1 or 2 or 3 years. And I did. And, at this point, I don't owe anybody any money on my 20% down for the first 10 years of those 12 properties that I had mentioned. Nowadays, I may pick up 2, 3, 4 on a good month, 5 properties that I'm going to keep as rentals. And the goal will be to have no money invested into those deals in the end. So I'm sure everyone's wondering, well, Dave, how do you do that? How do you go about doing that, right? Well, let's review really quickly what I did wrong, and then I'll talk about how I do it now the right way. So in the beginning, I was going to an agent first, finding on-market properties via the MLS, making offers on those properties, but not really getting much of a discount at all, and then getting those properties under contract. Then I would go to a bank and I would get a loan for 80%. And the bank would say, well, Dave, you need 20%. And then I would go get the 20% from friends and family and acquaintances. That was the strategy I used in the beginning. It's a terrible strategy because it's slow. It requires a lot of capital, and you can't really get a discount because what you're wanting to pay is what the appraiser is going to assume everybody else is going to pay. So even if you negotiate them down 10, 15, 20 grand, the appraiser is going to say, well, if you're willing to pay 165, we would presume that everybody else is. So this property is going to appraise at 165. If I'm paying 165 and it appraised for 165, there is no discount. I'm paying full retail, 100% of the value of that property. So that's the old way. That's the wrong way. Don't do that. It's what I did for 10 years. Yes, I was able to acquire 12 properties, and I'm not ashamed of that. But on a good month, I can acquire 6, 7, 8 properties now with no money out of pocket. So let's transition now, Ryan, into the new way. The new way is referred to as the BRRRR Method. It's literally probably my favorite strategy in all of real estate. And the way the BRRRR Method works is it's an acronym. It's B with 4 R's behind it. And the definition of the BRRRR Method, I've actually written a book on this method. You can find it on Amazon or Audible. But the definition of the BRRRR Method, in my opinion, is it's a strategy that real estate investors use to acquire assets with little to no money very rapidly, right? That's the definition of the BRRRR method. Again, let me repeat. It's a strategy that real estate investors use to acquire assets with little to no money very rapidly. That's the definition. So again, what is it? How does it work? Well, it's B with 4 R's. That's the acronym. And if we were to write this out, the B stands for buy, but really it stands for buy at a discount, because the BRRRR method is going to be a challenging process if you're paying full retail. So the B really stands for buy at a discount. And then behind the B, you have 4 R's. The first R is going to stand for rehab that property. The second R is going to stand for rent the property out. The third R is to refinance that property with a bank. And the fourth R is the easiest R. It's repeat. You're going to repeat this process over and over and over again. So how are we able to do this with little to no money? Well, before we do that, let's first talk about what the difference between an asset and a liability is. For those of you that don't know, hopefully everybody on this call knows, but for all of you that don't, an asset is probably not what you think it is. An asset is something that puts money into your pocket every single month, or maybe every single quarter, maybe every single year, ideally every month. Okay. So that shiny new camera that you just bought, or that boat that you own, or that RV, unless you're renting those things out, those are not assets. Those are liabilities. And in fact, the primary residence, the home that you're either in right now, or the one that you're going to go home to later tonight to make your dinner and watch TV and go to bed, isn't an asset either, unless it's paying you money every month to own it. So by definition, an asset is something that puts money into your pocket every month or on some sort of frequency, and it doesn't cost you money to own it. It actually makes you money to own it. Now, the opposite, the flip side, a liability is something that costs you money to own it. Your home is a liability. Your car is a liability. That shiny new camera you just bought, that's a liability. That boat, that RV, that camper, whatever, that drill, those new pair of shoes, that belt, whatever, doesn't matter. If it's not putting money in your pocket and it's not paying you to own it, it's a liability. So what we're going to be doing with real estate is we're going to find real estate that we can rent out, which makes it an asset. It's paying us to own it, not the opposite. So how do we do the BRRRR method? How do we do it at scale? And how do we acquire rental properties with little to no money, ideally no money at all? And oftentimes I can actually get paid money to buy a piece of real estate. Sounds crazy. And I can turn it into an asset. So here's how we do it, guys. We first don't go and find an agent. That's what we did with the old strategy. And then we would then go to the MLS and we would find a deal. We're not going to do any of those things. In fact, I don't typically like working with agents because they've already convinced a seller on the listing side the property is worth more than it is, and or that they're going to get full retail for it. So personally, I avoid agents like the plague because they've already done the opposite of what I'm trying to do. They've convinced a seller the property is worth more than it is. So what I want to do is I want to market directly to the seller. And I want to find the seller that's distressed, dealing with some sort of problem in their life. Maybe they have a vacant house. Maybe they're dealing with death. Maybe they're dealing with divorce. Maybe they're dealing with disease. Maybe they're dealing with job relocation. Maybe they're dealing with unpaid taxes. Maybe they're dealing with some sort of a judgment from a federal or an IRS tax lien. There's a million things that could cause somebody to be distressed. So we're going to market directly to these people. We're not going to go to the MLS. We're not going to hire an agent. All right. How do we market to these people? Well, guys, it's really simple. We're going to use our cell phones and we're going to call them. We're going to text them. We're going to find lists of people online that are dealing with some sort of issue, like maybe they have a vacant house. Maybe they have an absentee owned house. Maybe they have back taxes. Maybe they have code violations. whatever it may be. We're also going to utilize direct mail. We're going to send postcards and we're going to send letters to these individuals and let them know that we pay cash for houses and we can help them if they have a problem. And oftentimes that problem is a property. We also can utilize Google AdWords and a website and do SEO. And I have an ad on the radio in my local market, so people can call me if they hear my radio ad. So there's lots of different types of marketing that we can do. But before we do anything else in this business, we're going to market. In fact, marketing is every business, if you think about it. So we have to understand that before we do anything, we're in the marketing business. Ryan's in the marketing business. Hopefully he knows that. He's on a webinar with me right now, Marketing Camoplan. Great company, by the way. I love Camoplan. They do awesome stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You guys should check them out if you haven't already. But we are all in the marketing business before we are in any other business. I can assure you that. So we're going to do marketing, guys. We're going to do it via cold calling and cold texting and direct mail. And sometimes I go driving around neighborhoods to try to find the worst house in the neighborhood. And when I find it, I get out of my car and I go knock on the door. And I ask the person living there if they want to sell it. Maybe it's a tenant. I say, hey, can I get the owner's number? If I can't get the owner's number, I'm going to go online. I'm going to track them down. And I'm going to send them a postcard. Or maybe I'm going to send them a direct message on Facebook or Instagram. I'm going to do whatever it takes to locate the owner of that property. And then I'm going to see if they have any issues going on in their life. And if they do, I'm going to offer to help them, help solve some problems by buying the property, which therefore gives them money. Money typically solves most problems in people's lives. So that's what we do. So we're going to go and we're going to find a deal. But when we buy a property now, we're not going to pay full retail for it like I did in the past. What we're going to do nowadays is we're going to offer 20, 30, maybe more % of a discount. So let's assume that that property is, $150,000 and I want to get a 20% discount. That's a $30,000 discount. So I'm going to offer about between 100 and 120 for that property, assuming it needs no repairs. If it needs repairs, I'm going to subtract the cost of those repairs out after I discount that property by 20 to 30%. And oftentimes people are going to say, no, you're crazy. That offer is way too low. And I say, yeah, maybe. But, is anyone else offering to buy the property from you? And if you want more, then go hire the agent and deal with the showings, deal with the commissions, deal with the lengthy process, deal with the inspection and the inspectors, deal with the closing costs, deal with all these things. And if they want to go do that and get more money, well, then all the power to them. But what I do is I come in and I offer them convenience. That's simple. Really nothing else to say about this. We offer convenience in exchange for discounts. That simple. Don't overthink it. Some of you are probably thinking, what does that convenience look like, Dave? Well, I can break it down into 3 simple things. And these 3 simple things are typically going to make up about 80 to 90% of the convenience that we have to offer. Number 1, we pay cash. Number 2, we buy properties as is. We don't require the seller to paint them and repair them and declutter them. I mean, I buy houses from hoarders all the time that have 4, 5, 6 dumpsters worth of crap in there that I got to haul out. So as is. Number 1, cash. Number 2, as is. Number 3 is we close quick. Now, quick is a relative term. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to close in 4 days, but I'm going to be able to close much quicker than if they hired an agent and they listed it on the market, and then that buyer needs financing contingencies. And, typically speaking, you're looking at 2 to 4 months to sell a property on the market, give or take. And with me and my business, we can buy a property in 2 to 4 weeks. So that's extremely fast whenever you are comparing the two, relatively speaking. So we pay.
Dave, do you buy most of these no inspection, like when you say as is, just as is?
I inspect. Me, my business partner, if it's something that's above our pay grade, like maybe a foundation wall, then we bring a foundation guy out. So we still do inspections, but we're not presenting the inspection reports to the seller.
Right.
Trying to negotiate them down. We've basically padded in that in the beginning. Now, let's assume that we think repairs are 20, and then we determine after we do our inspections, and maybe we bring in somebody to help us with that, but we're not taking all that to them and saying, fix all this stuff. Instead, we're just saying, yeah, we've kind of baked this in. Now, let's assume that I think a property needs 20 grand worth of repairs and it ends up being 30. Well, then I'm going to go back to the seller and I'm going to say, listen, I miscalculated. I can still buy this property from you. That's the good news. I'm not going away. But the bad news is I underestimated the cost of fixing it. So I'm going to need to get a little bit better price from you. And it happens from time to time, but it's not a big deal. But I'm not bringing all my inspections to them saying discount my price because I've already padded that in 95% of the time. Or asking them to make those repairs. That's what the as is part of this convenience is. So great question. So moving on, we will find a property owner that's dealing with a distressed situation in their life where they have a distressed property, sometimes both. We'll offer to buy that property from them at a 20 to 30% discount minus the cost of repairs. Guys, what that ends up looking like is about 50 to 65 cents on the dollar at the end of the day, right? Let's say a property is worth 100,000 and I want to get a 20% discount. That brings it down to 80. But let's say that property needs $20,000, $25,000 worth of repairs. 80 minus 25 is 55. So I'm going to end up paying them 55,000 on a property that will be worth 100. However, it's going to need those repairs to get there. So at the end of the day, if you just want to look high level, big picture, simple, we're buying properties for 50 to 65 cents on the dollar on average. Doesn't mean I'm getting a 45% discount. I'm usually getting a 20% discount or greater, but then I'm also reducing the cost of the repairs. That $100,000 value only is 100,000 after we put 25 grand into it. It ain't worth 100 grand today, right? We're typically looking for properties that need work, that are distressed. So back to the BRRRR method. Let's try to make this simple and then we can open this up for a Q&A here. Step one, B, buy at a discount. We do so by marketing our business to people directly. We're not going on the MLS. We're not working with agents. Now, we do work with agents sometimes because they may bring us a deal, but ideally they're not listed on the MLS because then the sale data won't be public. We want to keep the sale data somewhat private. So when we go get appraisals later, they don't see what we paid for it because that's going to alter their thinking. So B, first step, buy at a discount. We do so via marketing. The next step, and when we buy at a discount, we're paying cash. It's not our cash. It's rarely my cash. What we do is we go work with a private lender or a hard money lender, a lender that is basically built a business catering to rehabbers or landlords like me and like you, hopefully, that will lend money short term at a high rate, anywhere from 10 to 15% annual. But don't let that freak you out because you're not borrowing the money for a year. You're borrowing the money for 2 or 3 or 4 months. So yeah, it may be a high interest rate, but at the end of the day, I typically average around $7,000 or $8,000 in interest costs. But if I can acquire an asset that's been rehabbed and I can bake in that $7,000 or $8,000 worth of interest cost by buying it at a discount, I don't have any money out of pocket in the end. So don't let that freak you out. But again, we'll buy at a discount, we'll use cash, we'll borrow that money from a lender, a private lender or a hard money lender. And here's the cool part. We don't just ask them to help us buy the property. We ask them to help us buy the property and to give us 20 or 30 or 40 grand on top to rehab the property. I don't use any of my own money to do deals at this point. So we're going to acquire the property. That's the B, buy at a discount. And we use a lender to help us do that. The next step is to rehab the property. That's the first R. Well, what we're going to do when we rehab the property is we're going to upgrade the property. We're going to make it safe. We're going to make it look pretty. We're going to make it clean. We're also going to reduce any capital expenditures that we may have on that property, ideally, for the next 7 to 10 years. So when we rehab a property, we are typically doing a roof. We're typically doing windows. We're typically doing an HVAC. We're typically doing new flooring throughout. We're typically putting in a new kitchen and a new bathroom. If it needs any plumbing or electrical, We're going to do that too. Reason is we don't want to mess with this house after we rehabbed it for 7 to 10 years. Of course, we may have to do turnover and touch things up and paint and do little repairs, but I don't want to have to come in 3 years later and put a new HVAC in. I don't want to have to come in 5 years later and put a new roof on it. I want to do all that stuff in the beginning and get it out of the way. But by doing that in the beginning, it allows for me to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to increase the value of that property. It's been rehabbed. It's updated. It's got new stuff. Of course, it's going to be worth more money now. But additionally, it's going to allow me to charge more money in rent when I go rent that property out. So not only am I getting equity in the deal by buying it at a discount, but I'm increasing my equity spread by forcing appreciation on this property by fixing it up and updating it and making it nice and pretty and new. So that's what the rehab process consists of. That can take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks all the way to 3 to 4 months, depending on the size and scope of the project. Again, I'm borrowing money to buy it and to rehab it. I don't want to use any of my own money. So B stands for buy at a discount. The first R stands for rehab. The second R, let's get to that, is rent it out. It's rent. Now, I rented out properties on my own for 10 years. Over the last 8 years, I've used property management companies because I just don't like dealing with the people, the tenants. I'd rather deal with the property. And also, I want to scale my business to $100 million worth of debt or assets under management. And trying to manage properties as well as scale is kind of counterproductive, right? You can't really do both. There's just not enough time in the day. At some point, we'll probably bring the property management back in-house. But as of today, I have 3 different property managers that I work with. They help me lease. They help me collect rent. They help me evict if it gets to that point. Hopefully it doesn't, but it does happen sometimes. And they help me manage the property. They manage the grass. They manage the taxes, they manage the insurance, they manage everything for me. It's great. So when it comes to renting the property out, you can do it yourself, or you can hire somebody to help you do it. And there's property management companies on every corner. They're a dime a dozen. So don't think that that's going to be a hard part. So that's the second R. You have rehab, then you have rent. The third R is the refinance. And this is really where the magic happens. So we bought a property at a discount from our marketing efforts. We've rehabbed the property. So when we bought it at a discount, we created a little bit of equity. When we rehabbed it, we created a little bit more equity because we forced the appreciation. Now we've rented the property out, which has made it go from a liability and turned it into an asset. So the third R is the refinance. And this is when I walk into a local bank or credit union and I say, hey, I'm looking to refinance a property that I own. And the bank's going to say, okay, no problem. So you're not looking to buy a property. And I say, nope, I'm not looking to buy a property. That's what I did in the very beginning. I'd buy a property using a bank. Well, now I don't use a bank to buy a property. I use a private or a hard money lender. And the reason is when I walk into the bank now, I'm not asking that bank to create new risk. The risk has already been created with me buying it with a private or hard money lender. Instead, I'm asking the bank to let me refinance that property. So there's already risk created. And now we're just going to shuffle the risk from the current lender to this new bank or credit union. Well, the bank's going to say, hey, we love transferring risk much more than we like creating risk. And it also helps a lot with the due diligence and the amount of paperwork that's needed to refinance a property versus to purchase a property. I hate using banks to purchase properties. The process is long and lengthy and time consuming and expensive, and it is a pain in the ass. And they're going to go through your taxes and your income and your balance sheet, and they're going to look at you with a fine-tooth comb, and you may not get approved. It's a pain in the butt. But when you walk into the bank and you say, hey, I already own the property, it's already in my name. Oh, by the way, I've already rehabbed it, which reduces the risk of the bank giving you the loan anyway, because if they have to take the property back, they can easily sell it with a new roof, a new HVAC, new flooring, new kitchen, new bath, et cetera, et cetera. And additionally, it's an asset because it's already rented. So we have to follow this process step by step, Because if we were to walk into the bank and say, hey, we want to buy a property, it's going to be a lot of work, a lot of risk. It's a pain in the butt. But if we've already bought the property, already rehabbed the property, already increased the value of the property, already reduced the risk and reduced any capital expenditures that we may have in the immediate future. And when I say immediate, I mean 7 to 10 years. And we've already rented that property out, making it an asset. More money's coming in than going out. Therefore, it's paying me every month. When I deliver that to a bank and I say, I want to refinance, Ryan, they say, great. How quickly do you want to do this? You want to do this in 2 weeks or 3? And I say, can we do it in 1? And they usually laugh and they say, we'll do it in 2. Deal. Done. So the bank pays back my private or hard money lender for my purchase. They pay them back for my rehab, and they often will even pay back the interest that I owe them, which allows me to acquire an asset, pay back that short-term loan with high interest rate, lock in a long-term loan with a low interest rate. I've captured equity. So here's the deal. The bank's going to typically lend 80%. If I can be all in at 80% of what it appraises for, the bank's going to lend me 80% of what it appraises for. So in the beginning, I was doing lots of things wrong. I was using banks to buy properties. I was using agents to go to the MLS to pay full retail for properties. There was no way for me to acquire equity in those deals. And even if I was able to negotiate them down a little bit, that just means the appraiser is going to come down a little bit to match the number, right? There's no way to really get ahead going the old strategy that I was using. But with this new strategy, let's assume I buy a property for 80,000. Simple math. I pay 80 grand to buy it. And then I need 25,000 to rehab it. 80 plus 25 is 105. Okay. Now let's assume that I have to pay my lender 5,000. Let's assume I do this quick and I do it in 3 months and there's $5,000 worth of interest. That's typically all paid in the back anyway. It's all paid in arrears. So 80 plus 25 is 105 plus $5,000 in interest puts me at $110,000. Well, let's assume that this property appraises for $140,000. 140 times 0.8 equals $112,000. The bank's going to send the appraiser out. The appraiser is going to say, wow, this is nice. You guys have done a bunch of rehab and updates on this property. And it's rented, bringing money in. It's an asset. Oh, this is great. We're going to appraise this property at $140,000. I owe $110,000 purchase, rehab, and interest to my lender. Well, if the bank says, Dave, we're going to give you an 80% loan, they're going to give me an 80% loan, not on my investment. That's the old way. The new way, because I'm refinancing, is they're just going to send an appraiser to that property. And if that property appraises for $140,000, Ryan, and they give me an 80% loan, that means that the bank's going to lend me $112,000. Well, for me to pay off all my debts is $110,000. So guess what? The closing costs are going to probably be around $1,500 to $2,000. Let's say $2,000. Let's round it up. Well, 110 plus 2,000 is 112, and that's what the bank's going to lend. So I'm able to pay back my lender, purchase, rehab, and interest in full, pay my closing costs in full, and acquire this new long-term loan with low interest and have zero money out of pocket. And when I say zero, I don't mean like, oh, I had to bring $85 to closing, like zero, no money out of pocket, zero zip zilch. And I have a home that is in my name or my business name. It's been rehabbed and updated, lowering the risk, lowering the capital expenditures, increasing the value, and increasing the rent. And then I've rented that property out and I've refinanced it, right? So I now own an asset that's paying me $200, $300, $400 a month in income. And on top of that, I'll have 20+% equity in the deal. So that's what the BRRRR method is. That's kind of the 101. That's the high level. And I'm obviously happy to stick around and answer some questions on the topic. Again, it's my favorite real estate strategy. Currently, I've done about 200 BRRRR deals in my lifetime. I own 65 single family homes. Not a single one of those properties has any money out of my pocket. 65 currently. I also own another 42 apartment units. I got some twos, I got some fours. I have a 23 unit building as well. I currently have a 67 unit building under contract. It's a motel, oddly enough, and I'm going to be converting it to 35 to 40 long-term units. So, by this time next year, I should have probably around 150 units. Right now, I'm just over 100, and I'm just getting started. So I love this business, and it is definitely one of the best ways to create wealth because you can use other people's money. And another thing I want to add really quick is, leverage is my best friend. I love leverage. I'm leveraging private and hard money lenders to acquire these properties. I'm leveraging contractors, general contractors, subcontractors to fix these properties up. I'm not doing any of the work. I'm leveraging property managers to lease them and keep them rented and to collect the rent. And if they don't pay the rent, they will deal with the tenants and evict them and the lawyers and the courts and whatever is required. I'm leveraging all those people. And then I'm leveraging long-term financing with banks and credit unions to acquire these assets long-term with lower rates. So I don't know of any other business that will allow you to use this much leverage. And it's not just financial leverage. It's leveraging people and partners and contractors and appraisers and bankers and all different types of people and businesses that are involved. So, and then last but not least, and I'll wrap it up with this, Ryan, but most people, if you ask them how much tax they pay, they're going to tell you 35%, give or take. And they're not wrong, but they are, because that's only the income tax. If you are a high earner, you may pay 42, 43, 44% in income tax. But here's the thing that a lot of people overlook. Income tax, yes, it is the majority of your taxes, but it ain't all your taxes. It's just the majority of it. So what other taxes do you have to pay? Well, whenever you go to the grocery store and you buy milk and eggs, you got to pay sales tax. And depending on your state, that can vary. But sales tax is roughly 8 to 10%. So not only are you taxed on the money that you make to put in your bank account, but when you go spend that money, you got to spend another 8 or 10% on top just to spend it. So that takes your relative taxes from, let's say, 35% to 45%. We're not done. You buy a house, you buy a car, you buy a boat, you buy a plane, you buy an RV, you buy a trailer. You have to pay personal property taxes to own those things and or real estate taxes. This beautiful home that I'm sitting in right here, this is where I live. You can kind of see the background. I spend $6,000 a year in property taxes just to own it. All right. So you have income taxes, you have sales tax, you have property tax or real estate tax, you have personal property tax. So things that you own, you have to pay annually to continue to own them. So what I'm getting at here is the average amount of taxes that we all pay, it's not 35%. It's 55%. Most people have no clue about this. They don't think about it. But I challenge you all to start thinking about it. Camel Plan can help you with this. Oddly enough, they can shelter taxes, defer them, and oftentimes reduce them to zero, right? But why real estate? Why am I even talking about taxes now? Well, here's the cool thing. When you own a piece of real estate that is rented out, the government will allow you to depreciate that asset. And depreciation for the layman terms, all that means is they allow you to create a phantom expense on that property every year. So for example, let's say I own a piece of real estate that I rent out. I'm able to go and I'm able to write off, let's say, roughly $3,000 worth of expenses on that property every year that I didn't actually have to spend that $3,000 on. So what does this do? Why am I talking about this? What it does is it allows you to lower your amount of income to pay less taxes in the beginning on that income. And you can't typically do this with many other asset classes, but with rental real estate, you can. So, personally in my business, I can earn $200,000 a year in income before I have to pay $1 in income taxes, because I offset my income with all of this depreciation from my real estate. So, if you talk to a really, really wealthy person, somebody that already has a lot of money, their focus and goal isn't to make more money, it's to keep as much of it as they can. So one lesson I would really like to really ingrain into the attendees here today is, yeah, making money is important, obviously. But what's more important than that is keeping more of that money. If you go make 200 grand, you have to pay 100,000 in taxes. You didn't really get too far. But if you can make 200 grand and keep 200 grand of it and pay no taxes legally, that's how you can create wealth. And then last but not least, if you have wealth that somebody else is paying off, when my tenants pay the rent, we pay the mortgage first. We pay the insurance next. Then we pay the taxes, right? Then we get some of that money left over. That's called cash flow. That cash flow could be $200, $300, $400 a month, maybe more in some cases. But the cool part is the cash flow is icing on the cake. The main thing that I'm concerned about is that these tenants are going to pay off these rental properties for me. Now, of course, it may take 20 years, but nothing in life is going to happen overnight that's going to be amazing. All things that are going to be good are going to take time. But if I can go create myself, again, I'm at about 14 million right now in assets under management, and I probably owe around 11 million. But that's quite a bit of equity that I've created. And if I can scale that up to 100 million in assets under management, and I can create myself, let's say $70 million worth of debt, that's $30 million worth of equity. But after 10 or 15 years, those tenants will pay that debt down. And after 30 years, maybe I won't have any debt anymore. And somebody else has paid off that debt. That, my friends, is good debt. And I encourage every one of you to look into creating good debt for yourself, because there's no better way to create millions and millions of dollars worth of wealth and to do it with very little taxes. That's all I got, Ryan. Let's wrap it up. Let's open up a Q&A, man. Sorry if that was lengthy, but hopefully that was valuable today.
No, I appreciate the information. All good stuff there. So how does someone get involved with you? Are they secured to the property, or how do you work it?
What do you mean by that? Get involved?
If somebody wanted to work with you, like be a private lender, do you take new people on? Or
Got it. Yeah, good question. Yeah, good question. So I have a lot of private lenders already. I'm always looking for more. They can connect with me directly, and I can, we can talk about that. My main focus at this point is twofold. Number one is to keep building my portfolio. Again, I'm about 15% of where I want to be. But number two, I help people learn how to do this for themselves. I coach them. I have a coaching business and an educational business. So if you're looking to, start buying rental properties and using the BRRRR method, I'd love to work with you. If you just have money laying around that you want to invest and make a return on that, we can talk about that too. So yeah, multiple approaches there.
How do they get a hold of you? You want to give your website and contact info?
Absolutely. So my website is called discountpropertyinvestor.com. And that's what we do. We buy properties at discounts and we turn them into assets. So you can head on over to discountpropertyinvestor.com to learn more. And or you can email me directly at david@discountpropertyinvestor.com. That's my email.
Well, that's easy enough. That's good. Well, I appreciate your time and everything today. I'm sure everybody enjoyed the information, and feel free to reach out to me or David with any other questions that we can help you with. Appreciate the time, David.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. Always a pleasure, my friend. Hopefully you guys learned a thing or two today.
All right. Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
See you, buddy. Thanks.
Later.